Okay, welcome to the lecture on the rib cage. And so I'll refer to this as either the rib cage or the thoracic chamber. And I'm going to start right here with our accouché man. And so that's interesting. It's not really focusing on it for some reason. Let me talk about the landmarks. Okay, so we have some really important landmarks. This is the pit of the neck or the suprasternal notch. I refer to it as the suprasternal notch. We talked a bit about this the other day. This is how it works. Yay. I had a student teach me that last semester, and I'm glad I remembered. Okay, so this accouché is very helpful because it is what's referred to as the flayed figure. So you can see a lot of the landmarks very easily. And one of the first landmarks I want to start with is the clavicle. Now, up here on the board, I've drawn out the clavicles for you. And I like this drawing because it's pretty simple. It helps you to see the basics of the clavicle. I mentioned last week that it's a very fragile bone in many ways. And it's thicker right here as it joins into this form called the manubrium. This is in Latin it means head. So that manubrium is the head of the sternal area. And it trajects down the thoracic chamber. And it's really what we distinguish as the midline right here. So the first rib sits underneath the clavicles. And that's an important distinction as well. They don't sit below or adjoin to the top of the thoracic chamber. These clavicles sit on top of the rib cage. They act like a bicycle handlebar. And the reason I wrote it this way is it's a basic classical S-curve. And it goes a short plane change, rounded, longer plane change, short plane change. And that's what I mean by the handlebars. Right here, it joins with the back of the scapula, and this is where we find the AC process, the chromium process. Very important. So that's the way that the clavicles join in. As you saw, the clavicles are about 1 hand length. So that's from the base of your wrist box to the top of your middle finger. That's 1 hand length. So the basic proportion of the clavicle is 1 hand length. So on the skeleton, it's just a little bit more narrow. But this isn't that stellar a skeleton anyway, so I'm not that concerned about it. Okay, so I'm going to direct your attention over to these drawings right here on the board. And what I like about these drawings is that it simplifies the shape. And if you can simplify a shape, then when you're doing an invention or a drawing from memory, it helps you to understand and state it really clearly. So here's the opening of that rib cage or thoracic chamber. It has this long plane change right here, and it ends at the wide point of that egg-like shape, and that is between the 9th and 10th rib. Now, this is the base of the gladiolus. So it goes manubrium, gladiolus, and then the xiphoid process right here, which is 2 finger widths above that is where you start CPR. So this is called the sword in Latin, and that proportion is about from here, the top of the manubrium, down to the thoracic arch is about 1 hand length. This is called the thoracic arch right here. And the thoracic arch is actually more angular on the male figure, like this, to this, and it's wider on a female. Again, some of these important structural distinctions help us to convey a more convincing form. So the back of this, or posterior point of view, we align with the spinal column. Now this is an important plane, so you get the outer convexity, same place, 10th rib is the wide point, depending on which art source you look at. And overall is the shape of an egg, this oval-like shape. On the back point of view, it's subdivided by this spinal column, but it has a downturned plane. So I'm going to need you to slide over just a little so that I don't hit you with this as I rotate. I apologize. I have gotten it conked by that, and it's not pleasant. Okay, so this is the spinal column I'm mentioning. What?
I was just thinking, do you want to go?
Oh, thank you. I don't know that they're seeing it all that well. Oh well. Okay, so thank you. This is the spinal column again. Here's our 7th cervical. So that kind of clues us in where that thoracic chamber is located. And right here is the head of that, down to the wide point of that rib cage. This is the base right here. And we're widest at that wide point. It's about a hand width. Okay, so we're about a hand width in size. Now that varies depending on the weight of the model that you're drawing, the proportions. There's a lot of different factors, but in the ideal, that's how much you're looking at. Okay, so on the back, which you can see it well on the skeleton, and you see it better on the accroché. This is a flat plane called the rhomboid plane. So where we have an intersection right here on the rib cage. This is one plane right here. Okay? So this is a front plane right here. It's about a hand width. And then it becomes side plane right at this important juncture right here where that becomes side plane. Now that's really important to remember, to realize about the skeletal structure. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that. Hopefully you can. Those of you at home, and welcome. Now, back to the actual drawings. So, as you're drawing this, both from imagination, both from life, you make sure that you understand the proportions. The basic overall proportion of the thoracic chamber is about 1.5 head lengths. Okay, 1.5 head lengths. Let me give you some of the terminology for the skeleton. That's really important as well. So here's the head, or the manubrium. I've given this to you earlier. This is the gladiolus. It means sword in Latin. And this is the xiphoid. So then connecting into that surface this is not bone, this is cartilage. And it's more flexible than is the bone. So one time my son, when he was 4 years old, went into respiratory failure. And I was writing up the ambulance now it's okay to talk about, but then it was very traumatic, and he survived and did quite well. But I remember this sensation, not only worried about him, but the fact that his whole thoracic chamber flattened against his spine. I didn't know that was even possible. So it just completely collapsed. And so as you can imagine, as mom, I was appalled. And it was a very life-threatening situation. But it has to be that way because anatomically, that's the breathing apparatus. So if this was all the strong, heavy bone of the rib cage, and none of the flexibility of this cartilage. The costal cartilage is in the name, or coastal, depending on where you're from, but that's cartilage. Okay, so that cartilage allows the diaphragm the flexibility to breathe in and out, to expand and contract. And that's what's causing you to be able to fill and empty your lungs. And that's a basic artistic explanation. Remember, we're not medical doctors. We're learning artistic anatomy and how it applies to drawing the human figure. Okay, so that's the subdivision right there where the cartilage comes into the rib cage. It's very flat on the side plane. As I mentioned, here it joins in. Here's the first rib right here, the second. All of the ribs are numbered, just like the vertebrae of the back. So it starts with rib 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. On 11 and 12, on the female form, they're almost nubs. There's almost nothing to them. So the female form has just the same number of ribs as does the male. That's kind of like a fable that female forms don't have the same ribs, but they are in some cases very small back here. And they join into the vertebral body here on the spinal column. Here's an important landmark right here. That's your 7th cervical. Okay. So back up to our Eckershey man. And yes, he'll wear a mask after this is all over, but these are important landmarks that I wanted you to see. So oftentimes in drawing, sorry, I'm trying to put that so you can all see it well. This is a form that you want to watch for the shape. Okay? This shape is so vital for helping you to see this form. This is the trapezius, and even in my painting class today, that was something that the students weren't seeing well. And they either blow out the proportion of that, making it too large, or they compress it and make it too small. So it's this triangular form. And it's a very distinct form on George R. model. That trapezius has both the front axis, it has a side plane, and it has the back plane. And it's part of this muscle group that we'll talk about later called the trapezius. And it starts right up here at the back of the skull. It looks like the shape of a kite, ending in your 12th rib. Okay, so muscles originate and insert, and in that case, it inserts into the 12th vertebrae. So it's a very long muscle. But for us on the anterior of the form, this shape right here is incredibly important. All right, now the clavicle we just talked about. So you have the head of the clavicle creating this insert right here called the pit of the neck, or the suprasternal notch. Okay, all of you reach up and fill yours. I was kind of blessed. There's two different stories. My dad had a different version than my mom does. My mom said I was born with a birthmark right there. My dad said I got it caught in a zipper in my little snowsuit. But I got a nice little mark right there for the rest of my life. So that suprasternal notch is the start of the clavicle. And right there, that's that plane break that I want you to pay attention to, that AC process, because it's going to help you to get the overall alignment for this shoulder line here. That is the most important, the second most important decision. So you notice that from here to here you can have two different plane changes on your midline. There are three independent movable forms. You've got a head, one head length, then down from this point to the nipple point is a head length. From the nipple point to the navel mark is a head length. And from the navel mark to the symphysis pubis, or pubic bone. Those are all head lengths. Not hand lengths, head lengths. Okay, and a head length is from here to the high point of the skull right here. Okay, that's a very important distinction. So we've talked about a hand length being right here to here. The front plane of the face to the hair mass, which if this had hair, it would be right there. So that is one hand length. The important proportion is this anterior spine of the septum, the base of the nose, to this suprasternal notch is one hand length. Now notice, we'll talk about the cube system in just a second. But from the cube system, it breaks down to the base of the rib or thoracic chamber. So here's one unit, and here's one unit, and from here to here is one unit. No, not here to there, to there. This is one unit right here to here, here to here, here to here, here to here, here to here. So the head, as far as units or cubes, is 3 cubes long, or 4 heads in length. I know those are a lot of different numbers, but if you'll just put them in your sketchbook and then remember them, they'll be helpful when you're doing any type of animation, when you're doing any type of anatomical study, and when you're working from the model. Yes, please.
Can you repeat that, please?
Sure. Okay, so we've got 2 systems that we've talked about so far today. Hand length, right? And head length. Head length.
Oh no, I meant like the cubic.
Okay, I'll be reviewing that in just a second for you. All right, so that's the head lengths. It's 4 head lengths to the pubic bone. This point right here is vital to you understanding because it's the halfway point. It's the anatomical center of the whole body. So it's half here to here and half here to the base of the foot. Important measurement, especially for any invention or memory drawings. Okay, so here's the cube system right here. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this because my little battery said it's about out. Okay, so now as far as an invention, we're still going to continue on with this process. So here's the cubes. So a cube is equal-sided, right? And it has, within this cube, it has from here to here, which is the line for this first cube, that's 1 hand length. This to this is the thoracic chamber. It's 1.5 head lengths, 1.5 head lengths. So when you wonder, well, how do I start my head correctly? Well, then you think this is 1.5 head lengths, and then you just double it, and that gives you the height of the head. Doesn't that make sense? I think that's so exciting. Okay, so then the base of this cube right here to the symphysis pubis, or the pubic bone, this is half here to here, and you divide that cube in half, and it gives you the height of the as-is. Remember that big long landmark that I talked about? So here's your as-is right here. You can fill it on your own form. This is the anterior superior iliac spine. That's the as is. And then there's just this 3-finger gap here to here, and then you draw down to the symphysis or midline, right there. So that gives you the pelvic structure. There's this soft tissue form in here. The musculature is actually called the external oblique muscles and the rectus abdominis. You can see it right here on the form. Here's the rectus abdominis, right here to here, down to here, and clear on the back of the form is the external obliques. That's just an overview. We'll be talking about these much more in depth. Okay, so I'm going to move on to this drawing right here. This is, again, we have a two heads wide for the overall shoulder. Okay, 2 heads wide. We always want to make sure we state our midline and our shoulder line. Third, we want to state our clavicles. On the male figure, these are much more angular. On the female form, they're much more lateral, meaning this is a male figure, obviously, but the clavicles are very lateral. What that does is it extends the length of the female neck. The nipple point is a soft tissue landmark. And those soft tissue landmarks that are right here on the accroché, they're between the 4th and 5th ribs. We've got the top of the thoracic arch, and it sights down here to here, here to here. The wide point of the rib cage is the 9th and 10th rib. And then on this cube system, it travels down. You get this empty gap, this kind of no man's land, where there isn't any skeletal form right in here. So this really helps you. So when you're doing an invention, you can turn that form. So here's the shoulder line, here's the midline. If you understand how that rotates in space, just like this drawing right here, you'll always have a good understanding of how that form is turning in space. I think that's probably going to be all that I'm going to do for you today. Again, this is a proportional chart. Hopefully you can see it well. I think it's really important that whenever we're drawing, we remember that let's not be perfectionists. It's how many drawings you're actually doing rather than how many perfect drawings that you can put up on the wall. Okay? So you're going to really learn by repetition. Now, I practiced this. I hope I can say it right. The Bruce Lee quote. He said, "I do not fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. I fear the man who has practiced," let's see, did I do it wrong? I always do it wrong. Okay, 10,000 kicks one time. There we go. 10,000 kicks one time. I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. There you go. Botch it every time. For 10,000 times, evidently. But here's the thoracic chamber clearly within the drawing, and that's important to see that. You can see this soft tissue area located at the base of the rib cage. There's the last rib, and it comes down to the as is, and you can see that box-like form. So that's going to be it for our lecture today on the rib cage. I really want you to pay attention to that when you're drawing today.